all the names of the examples in the paper were male names and white British names. And I just spent the first 10 minutes of my paper circling them.
What, actually during the exam?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, and I was irritated. Even as a child, it was like, why can't I do that? I want to do this. And I couldn't bear the fact that people were telling me I couldn't do something because I was female. I'm a change maker campaigner, and if something doesn't make sense and it could be better, I won't sit back and let it happen. I will push to make something work.
Jan, thank you very much for joining me on Success Matters podcast. You were introduced to me by Charlotte Blair, who's a friend and a former colleague, and she described you as the most intelligent woman that she knows, which is a big title to live up to. But I know in our prep call, you were certainly, you are very, very intelligent and very, very able. So if we start with that, your background, you have a PhD in material science, is that correct?
Yeah, my PhD is in the radiation damage of solar cells for satellites.
Okay.
And primarily silicon solar cells, but I did work on gallium arsenide ones too.
Right.
Quite a few years ago now. And it was really looking at the defects in the solar cells that were caused by radiation in space, knocking silicon atoms or some of the doping materials off their lattice sites. And basically, when the sunlight lands on the solar cells, it sucks them up into these defect sites and stops them being efficient. And that's not good when you've got a satellite whizzing around the Earth.
No, indeed. And of course, up in space, there's not that shield of atmosphere to stop a lot of this solar material, solar winds, I suppose, affecting things like solar panels and satellites up in space, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So how did you actually go about researching that on the ground? Unless, of course, you went out to space to do it. I don't know.
No. So we were designing new solar cells at Southampton University, and ones that were radiation hard that would last for longer in space.
Right.
And we had special wafers that we had designed and created and manufactured. We then had solar cells built on top of them, and we used to simulate the and test them. So simulate the conditions in space by zapping them with electrons and protons. And I had a piece of equipment that I used to measure them with, and we would then heat treat them and do things to them and measure them. And we also had an array that was sent up into space, which was super exciting. However, the nature of research is that when the data came back, the temperature sensor system had broken.
Oh no!
In transit, and so it was a bit of an awkward moment for my PhD. So I learnt resilience,
right?
And so I had to redesign my experiment schedule and think about how we could go about doing it. But it would have been, it was so exciting to be able to actually get an array that with our cells on in space.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of been easy to get that arranged, to get on board a rocket that's going to take your array up to space and all of that. So that in itself must have been quite not laborious is the wrong word, challenging, thing to make happen.
We were working with the UK's Defence Research Agency, and that's the organisation that manages all of the research satellites. And so they were my sponsors for my PhD.
Okay, how cool. This could become a very geeky conversation because my background is in chemistry, and so I'm fascinated by the work that you were doing there. But we'll leave the chemistry to one side. The work you're doing now is more in regards to creating an inclusive environment for engineers. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I frequently say to people, I've never planned to do this. I'm not quite sure how I would have even known that there was a role that I could earn a living from doing this, but it became a passion.
Right.
Partly through experiences and things I'd seen happen in academia, things I'd seen and experienced in industry, and also then opportunities that came my way working in science policy. I went for a 6 months comment to the Department for Trade and Industry to lead the UK's campaign to get more women in science and engineering. And I became the UK's expert to the European Commission, which was a really exciting opportunity to have. So it was something that I've always said I was born with an extra fairness gene. And even as a child, it was like, why can't I do that? I want to do this. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't bear the fact that people were telling me I couldn't do something because I was female. And then I was complaining about some injustice somewhere. And my mum said, there's other things to worry about, like getting the tax system sorted. Okay. And then a year later, my physics O level at the time, all the names of the examples in the paper were male names and white British names. And I just spent the first 10 minutes of my paper circling them.
What, actually during the exam?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, and I was irritated in my exam, but then I went on to do it. I did get a good grade. Yeah. So, but that part of me has always been there. And so over time, I've looked, observed, I've wanted to do things for myself, and I've made things happen. I wanted to work part-time, not because I wanted a family at the time, but because I wanted to get back down to the South Coast to see my boyfriend and go windsurfing.
Okay.
And I wanted to leave work an hour or two early on a Friday to avoid some traffic. And in the end, we worked to change the hours for the whole company. So I've always been that, you can't do that. Well, that doesn't make sense. Why not? Okay, let's change it.
Right.
So I'm a change maker campaigner. And if something doesn't make sense and it could be better, I won't sit back and let it happen. I will push to make something work. So
right.
I saw things, and I saw talents. I saw friends leaving organizations. I saw people above me experiencing harassment, misogyny, all sorts of things. And so I left academia, and then I worked in industry, and I'd say things were better. And then I ended up working in science policy, really where you got the opportunity to change what's being done. And over the years, I've learned new techniques. I've you may be familiar with the fixed mindset, growth mindset.
Yeah.
I've always had learner mindset.
Okay.
Like, so what? So what can I learn from that? How can I improve it? And then how can I improve it for other people? And how can I lift everybody up? How can I help everybody have their best day at life and their best experience at work? How can we help people design things better and make the world a better place?
Mm-hmm.
Just a small thing.
Yeah, exactly. But that's exactly what, life is about, right? How can we make the world a better place? And I really like that, because that's what the Success Matters podcast is about, is, helping people see that life doesn't necessarily need to be the way it is for them, and, giving some inspiration from any of the conversations that we have in this. So it's great kind of thing there. So at the moment you are working with various projects on bringing more women into engineering. Is that the kind of a good summary?
Yeah, I think I do more than that. Where quite a few years ago, I did the first piece of work in the UK that looked at how many Black and Asian scientists and engineers we had.
Right.
And as part of that project, brought a lot of people together who were doing small initiatives. And we're talking here 20 years ago, and got some funding for the organisation I was working for. That we did a big survey, and we analysed the labour force date survey, and we looked at the higher education statistics that was available to see how many people are going into degrees, what degrees are different people going in, what's their background, what's their socioeconomic background, where are they coming from, but also what subjects are they choosing to do as an undergraduate, and how many are transitioning into the workplace. And then looking at the distribution of people by gender and ethnicity in science and engineering occupations, fascinating. I really love evidence, looking at it and thinking, why is that like that?
Right.
Is there a reason? What can we do to make it different? And if it's something that people aren't going into because they don't think it's for them. So it's not just about women at all. And I think if we look at what we do to improve things for women, not just to bring women up and give them confidence, but to make sure that the workspace is open, welcoming, inclusive,
Right.
and values their contributions. So, yeah, to say I just work around women in science and engineering, no,
Is that
much
right?
bigger.
Okay, makes sense. So what did you find 20 years ago when you did this research, and what's different today from 20 years ago, or is nothing different today?
Yeah. So 20 or so years ago, when I started doing work on women in science, there were an estimate of around 70 to 100 really active people promoting women and science. And one of the things I wanted to do was grow that community. There was a couple of organizations looking around ethnicity in science and engineering, but they were very poorly funded. And it was really driven by a small, very, very small number of people. And the percentage of non-white British engineers or scientists was tiny. And they were typically going into, if we look at Asian people going into science and engineering, they were choosing IT, computing, electronics, pharmacy, ophthalmology.
Yeah.
And my colleague who's from Sri Lanka said that he thinks that is an element of these are degrees that enable you to go and become and set up a business.
Yes. You can
And
follow that path. That's kind of the thinking. Like, when in an Asian family, it's typically medicine, engineering, accounting, lawyer, because that sets you up on a career path, pretty much straight away, as opposed to maybe an arts degree where then there's no clarity in terms of what that career path might look like. So yeah, it's very much a cultural thing. But of course, yeah, they might do the degree, but then do they follow, like if they do chemistry or physics or biology or mathematics, do they then follow that path into becoming a scientist in that line?
I think having more of a vocational degree that has that clearer path and it reaps immediate rewards. But I think there was research that we came across that really laid bare the challenges of fundamentally racism and bias about recruiting people whose names didn't fit,
Right.
and how the recruiters became a barrier to entry to some professions,
Mm-hmm.
and hence going into a role or a job where you were your own boss, you freed yourself
Yes.
from those challenges. When you look in engineering, the challenge for people for Black British students was very much around that they weren't doing the sciences at school, and they were not perceived as being bright and clever. Maybe because they were coming from regions of London or Birmingham that had strong accents. We are talking quite a long time ago in the scheme of things. There wasn't a huge number of growing numbers, but we've really changed now. We've got so many more young people of all different backgrounds going in and being encouraged and achieving at school. And we've got so many programs around mentorship and encouraging people from Black and Asian backgrounds to go and visit universities on summer schools and programs. Huge amount of outreach. And the other thing that's really transformed is the number of, and I know particularly Black women and Asian women going out and doing schools outreach and standing up and talking about and celebrating their passion for engineering and science, but particularly in engineering, how they're making a massive difference to the world. But you know what shines through from all of them is their passion and energy. Mm-hmm. And they are an amazing group of people. So having people who can stand up and be out there in the public looking like people in the schools that weren't coming through is changing things, I believe.
Yeah.
So I'm really delighted to see the shifts in the numbers coming through and the number of non-white scientists and engineers achieving in the professional engineering societies. we need to see that as well in industry too.
And so that's a shift that's happened over the last 20 years is that. But I suppose there's still, and this is my perception, it may be incorrect, but engineering in Western society is not necessarily seen as a career for women to follow, or they kind of start on that journey and then they don't kind of follow it through. Whereas in Asian society, engineering is as much of a valid career to follow for a woman as any other career. So why do you think there might be that difference, or is my perception wrong?
There are differences in different countries and different cultures as well. And the Latin America, in the Middle East, even in Ireland, there's more women in computing, for example. But where the numbers of women going into computing has been falling. There are cultural aspects. A lot of I think it's just a quirk that some of the Catholic faith-based countries have more women in these non-traditional areas. But what we do see is in many careers for women, you see an M curve. You see people going in, having a career break and coming back in and leaving. And whereas in science and engineering, quite often you see the sort of the peak, and then gradually they tail off, have a career break, but they don't come back so much. There are some really great returners programs for helping women get back in. I think we also need to think about late entrance into the discipline as well. But there are elements of normalizing career breaks for men and for women, because career breaks are a thing that people who are creating babies typically take, and there are quite often two people involved in creating it. So sharing that responsibility, I think, is important. But also, once we start normalizing it across the majority workforce, which in engineering is male, then we start getting people to think more about what can we do to retain that talent? How can we keep people connected and engaged in the workforce? How can we not prejudge people's commitment to their role because they're running off to do the school run? And I know so many more engineering couples that there is more shared responsibility about the school run, about the school play. I'm seeing more senior engineers, male engineers, going off to the carol concerts at Christmas. That's really good to see that shared responsibility. And that's one of the reasons I do the work I do, which is about building those inclusive teams. Think about what someone's bringing to the team, and how can we help them be their best? So we're not making assumptions about what we think they are thinking about at work when they're quiet. They might just be big thinkers. So I want to create this workspace that's dynamic, vibrant. People come in and are able to manage their life and get that balance. COVID's really shifted a lot of things as well.
Yeah. So how do you help a team or a group of people get the best out of everyone who are a member of those teams?
I use a number of tools. I use the Clifton Strengths tool. Yesterday I was doing a workshop with some engineers using a tool based around the book written by Kim Scott, who worked at Apple and Google, called Radical Candor, which is helping people have really good conversations with each other, and not, when somebody frustrates them, not going all silent. So Clifton Strengths I use to help people as an individual level. How do I come across? But also get really deep sense of self-awareness, and giving, I think, engineers this vocabulary to talk about themselves, but also checking with other people. Quite often in engineering, as someone described it to me recently, you've got high IQ people with a low EQ.
Right.
Don't always understand what other people mean. So when you have these tools that give you a vocabulary to both understand and analyze your own behaviors and check in with people, you start having a much more robust conversation, and you help people feel like the manager is able to check in and say, you said that to me, is that what you really meant? Because it means something different to me. But equally, if you are the the report, you're able to explain things better to people because you can use these tools to have a deeper, really, just a deeper conversation. And it also works with, in engineering, we've got a lot of neurodiverse people.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people with neurodiverse, who are more diverse in their neurodiversity, they might not understand and read human emotion in facial features. They might not understand how you're feeling, and giving them a tool and a framework enables them to think, oh, if you're using Clifton Strengths framework, you're not. I've asked you a question and you're not really responding. Oh, but I know you've got intellection written on your name badge or on your email footer. You're a big thinker. I don't think you're ignoring me. You're thinking.
Right.
Or you might ask, you might have asked me a question. I might be very transactional in my way that I communicate with you, and you're full of relationship themes, and you're talking about, oh, people are doing this and they might be feeling that. I might not understand you. Oh, but I know that you've got relationship themes. I know that you're overly enthusiastic and positive because you've got positivity. So I can then read what that means when I come for a meeting with you, and I'll understand it better because I can read about it and I can ask you about it. Why are you so happy? Because there's always going to be a better way today. And it's sometimes having that language around the emotion helps you understand it. And I think that is really powerful to be able to give that to people. So that kind of long answer around what do I do?
This is cool.
I'm passionate about it.
And to be fair, I've never really thought of strengths finders in that fashion. Particularly now, as you were sort of talking about the diversity of ways of thinking, and of course, in a scientific or engineering fashion, people are often in that kind of very logical thought process. That's kind of what got them to where they are. And as you say, sometimes people who are neurodiverse may be very much down that particular kind of path without having any emotional intelligence around that. And a little bit like Big Bang Theory, the characters in Big Bang Theory, right? You've got these different characters. And so just the thought of actually people knowing kind of your strengths, the top 5 or whatever, at least that starts that conversation, whereas otherwise it might be, oh, that person over there, they're difficult. Don't go and talk to them, or, they never explain things properly. So yeah, it's fascinating actually how a simple assessment or tool can have so many different ways in which it can be used.
I think in engineering, you just said, the stereotype of an engineer being logical minded, analytical, dealing with facts and data. And when I've been working with UCL in University College London with the engineering faculty for, nearly 15 years, and started looking at it to help understand around where did the graduates go and the differences by gender, and was introduced to Clifton Strengths then. And what we found was that going across the integrated engineering program that they run across the first 2 years, we were doing Clifton Strengths with around 800 to 1,000 students every year. And you soon see that you don't just have these stereotypical engineers. And one of the things I find and have observed is that if you aren't this logical, analytical character in engineering, of course you can do numbers, of course you can fix things and see problems, but actually we need engineers that are diverse.
Yeah.
We want engineers that connect with people, see the human problems, feel the human pain, which drives them to go and find a solution. But what we find, or we've observed, is that the engineers that are more people oriented, not always, but sometimes they try to come across as being more logical and analytical.
Right.
And what they're doing in that is they're squashing the innate characteristics of who they are. And So I'm not talking about men or women here. I'm just talking generically
Yes.
about engineers, that if you want to be perceived as a really good engineer and you think an engineer is logically minded, analytical, you try to be like that. And so when you then go for an interview, you're trying to come across as that. Well, you're not going to get the job because it isn't the
Got the
essence
real,
of who you are.
yeah.
And so I really want everybody to be who they are and to be their best, so that people know who they're recruiting,
Mm.
because we want to know that you've got somebody who's not trying to fit into this particular mold. You want someone who's going to help add value to your team and be able to have fascinating, robust conversations and solve really challenging, wicked problems. So that's, yeah. So I think of all the tools, the Clifton Strengths doesn't label you, it doesn't box you. So I have been called an evangelist for it. But I think there's so many other things that we can add on to that as to help people understand who they are, but help them understand how they interact with and can understand when they might frustrate other people. So if you were a big thinking character, I'm sure you're really people oriented just because of the conversations that we've had and how you draw and ask great questions of people as well, that you connect with people in a really big way. And so if you were working in a team where everybody else just wanted to think and get stuff done, it's like, oh gosh, here comes Sanjay again, asking us more interesting,
Yeah.
big questions. We haven't got time for that. We've got a deadline.
Mm.
And so there'd be this polarization of people in the team. And I think we need to help the thinking and doing characters understand the value that people who like to connect, the people who are the glue in the team, bring everybody together. And I think it's a really foundational layer of building that strong team. And engineering is so much about a team that connects and works together, that becomes this kind of interactive machine that does this, does that, but knows how to flex and grow. And isn't that about what success builds success? Is that lubrication and empowerment of the individual within an organization.
Yeah, and I suppose also there's this other side to it, which is that when people go for jobs, often the job description will say you've got to have this, and this, right? So they're already starting to almost mask those other parts of what they have to try and meet that job description. And then they go for the interview and they think based on the job description, they're going to talk in a certain way. And so it becomes almost like a vicious cycle, right? That you're just presenting how you think you need to present to get the job. And once you're in the job, everyone else is kind of similar. And therefore, then you're not getting that diversity of thought that you want to bring to the table potentially.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it is about how do you then release that authenticity and let people be who they are.
Yeah.
And I think early in my career, I was finishing my undergraduate project, and my supervisor said, "So, what are you going to do when you finish, Jan?" And I threw a couple of ideas his way, and he said, "You need more than enthusiasm." And I was like, it took me a while. I was thinking, what does he mean by that?
Yeah.
And then I did Clifton Strengths, and I've got a lot of the orange influencing themes. I've got activator, but I've want things to be, I've got maximizer. I want everything to be really great, but I've got strategic ideation. So I'm always looking ahead. What can we do better? How can we get there faster? And that with my activator just creates this general energy of bringing people together. And I'd like to go and have a coffee with them actually, and say, you know what, enthusiasm is what has got me where I am. Enthusiasm and passion, and it's founded on my knowledge of science and engineering, my capacity to be able to work with scientists and engineers, and love a bit of really slick engineering. Great bits of pieces that work together, machine. So I love the beauty of engineering, but I don't know that I was put on the earth to do that, because I see there are things that are wrong with it that I can fix as a profession.
Yeah. So as you know, this podcast is called Success Matters. What does success look like to you?
Well, I could take that in two ways. What does success look like for me in terms of myself,
Yeah.
which is about being able to make a difference?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that my 15th choice of career, when people ask me, was I want to make a difference. And so being able to create those opportunities and then make something happen, that is my success. Seeing something that's not working
Mm-hmm.
and then being able to explore and analyze it and then think, actually, this could make this really good. That is success for me. Seeing somebody on a chat group 14 years ago looking for a pair of size 4 safety boots. And then somebody said, I need size 3. And then somebody else said, I need size 2. And I emailed a few people who made personal protective equipment, didn't get my reply. And I just thought in the after, I'll just phone up. And I happened to phone a company that made safety equipment. And one of the directors picked the phone up. Didn't know I'd got his number.
Okay.
And I said, I'm curious, do you make size 2 safety boots? Do you make any smaller ones? Do you make them in a women's fit? He just said, I know it's an issue, but it's not a priority. So for me, what can I do about that? So I got together with a group of women engineers and we crafted a survey within the Women's Engineering Society. And we did a report on PPE for women, not just about boots, but all safety equipment. And we then had a conversation with lots of manufacturers, and that survey has been rerun 3 times. And we now see amazing jackets and trousers. There still aren't enough boots, but we're
Yeah.
seeing a change, and the fact that we've got PPE designed for women. So to me, that's something I feel I've made a difference there. That's a success for me. And then I want to be able to see how can I help other people be their best? How can I help grow a team conversation? And the energy I get from workshops when I see it, if it's an individual contributor workshop, it might be young people, undergraduates, seeing them shine a light on themselves and be able to help them craft a statement so they can stand in the front of a room and say, my name is James Smith, and I love solving problems. I love being able to bring people together. It fills my bucket.
Yes, I know what you mean, especially with the workshop piece, because I do some workshops, both in my sort of day job, but also for a local school, and just seeing the way in which the kids are able to stand in front of the room. We give them a task they only have 20 minutes in which to do some research and get the head around the models that we're presenting. But just kind of listening to them, it's just like, I love it, because you can see that growth in them as individuals and confidence and all of that. That for me is very much success as well. It's, that just seeing those people develop, but one day they'll come back and they'll think, you know what, that workshop that Jan ran, that really made a difference to my whole trajectory.
Yeah. It's so amazing. Power, is it a power to have that, or just it's an opportunity, and it's a privilege in a way to be able to go into those spaces, and the trust that people put in you to help believe that you can help them shift their mindset. And it's like, I still sometimes, I can't believe sometimes the feedback I get from workshops. And I did a really workshop for the Institution of Civil Engineers last year, and I was given the guy who asked me to do it sent me an email afterwards, said, I did give you quite a tall brief. He asked me to facilitate a conversation between their I think there were 400 reviewers, professional reviewers. So the people who, when you go for your professional review, you are interviewed by 2 people. And this was a conference of these reviewers, mid to late career engineers. He said, can I go and talk to them about diversity and inclusion and what it means in the engineering review process and in the profession? And he said, yeah, okay, no problem. And he said, so there'll be about 300 people, and and then I said, I can do that. Yeah, no problem. And then he said, half will be in the room and half will be virtual.
Hi.
And then it turned out there were 420, not 320.
Okay.
And the feedback, if I'm having a day when I feel a bit like, what am I doing? We all have those days. And I just open up the spreadsheet of the impact, the feedback. What did I learn? I just read that. And there were comments like, oh, Jan really helped us to broaden our perspective of what diversity means. Because I had people thinking around, I asked a couple of similar questions. Who is a really big thinker? Big future thinker, deep thinker? And I had 40% of the people, yes, that's me. Who is the kind of person that likes to just get on and get things done? And 75% of people. What happens when you're both sitting across the project planning table from each other? And I was just laughter erupted across the room because there were a lot of project managers there in the room. But it was the sort of insights they gained into the fact that diversity is not just about, you've got a brown skin, I've got a white skin. It's not just about you're male, I'm female. It's also about, I want to get out there and get started. You want to sit down and work out a detailed plan.
Yes.
It's that diversity of difference. And it's not just about being neurotypical, neurodiverse. It's about being a unique human being. And so reading the feedback that ticked all of those things was really amazing. So I like to think I've touched lots of different people's lives in that way. So
yeah, and what you just said about diversity, diversity, equity, and inclusion has been in the news a lot recently because of the kind of political landscape. And often people do focus on, the brown, white, male, female, gay, non-gay, whatever the kind of thing is. That's what they tend to label DEI as. But actually, as you said, it's the diversity of thinking and bringing new ideas and generating kind of different perspectives and viewpoints. And that's where the real magic happens, isn't it? In anything that you're doing, any projects or any team or any work that happens.
Yeah. I was involved with UCL designing their it's now an award-winning integrated engineering program. And we took a design thinking model and we put a new box in it into the flow diagram. And it said, how has your contribution in terms of who you are and where you've been in your life experiences, how has that shaped your thinking on the problem? When you've got engineers and students from all across the world, really makes a difference when they start thinking, oh, well, I know about this. Or somebody when we were piloting it said, oh, well, I worked here in my year out, and I was able to bring this into the thinking about this particular problem that we're working on.
Right.
And the students were doing a bumper sensor design, and somebody had volunteered because they thought they were going to do medicine, but they volunteered with some disabled people. And when they were doing the bumper sensor, their experience of when you might use that technology helped that project team think really differently. So diversity is like this. I'm certified with there's an ISO 30415 for diversity and inclusion, and it's a process into diversity, and it stops people thinking around box ticking, and it's like a maturity model. But there's 27 different diversity types, and it includes that the usual protected characteristics, but it also is, have you been in the military? Because that frames how you think, because you're working within a very defined system. What is not just about your faith. What do you do in your spare time? What is your passion and your subject? So, we need to. The challenges that have been coming out of America in the last 6 months have opened up the conversation, but they using phrases like woke as a criticism, a bit like my dad used to use being a feminist as a criticism.
Right.
I'm like, I'm proud of being a feminist.
Yeah.
And actually, Dad, I think you're one too.
Yes.
And he went, what do you mean? I said, well, you let me do what I want to do. You let me you let me use the tools to strip my bike down. You let me go and do any degree that I chose to do. You didn't say I should be doing this.
Mm.
So actually, you're a feminist, and which made he was really quite taken aback by that. But we shouldn't be criticizing people and putting them in a box saying you're this or that and you're woke, because actually being woke is about wanting to realize the potential of people, and it's not, it shouldn't be criticism. And the damage that's being done, we're going to go completely off topic here. The damage being done to science and research by stopping projects because they've got anything related to diversity within the title. A couple of examples, but they're scooting out of my head at the moment. Whole blocks of research have been quashed because somebody who doesn't understand the science has gone through a spreadsheet and searched for a couple of words, and it's been cancelled. And yeah, I'm not going to talk about that on a Friday afternoon. It is damaging to science engineering. It's damaging to people's lives, and not people's lives because we want more women scientists, minorities in science, because we want to make people's lives better. And it's white men's lives that will be made better by that research as well. And that is being lost in the understanding of what we mean about diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, it's kind of lost in translation almost, right, in terms of what it means.
Yeah. And I hope all the cases that are going through the legal courts in America will block things, but a lot of damage is being done.
Yeah, that's where we're coming from. So in this podcast series, I always ask a previous guest to ask a question for my next guest. The question my last guest asked, I kind of think you answered it already in much of the conversation, is your definition of success the same as your heart's desire?
I think I would say yes, it is, because I have not so much followed my passion, but I followed the way that I want to change the world.
Right.
Which is about enabling people to do the jobs they want in a way that they want and not feel constrained to do it in a way that's different. And things that I've bumped up against through my career, I would like to think that I've changed some hearts and minds about doing it. And so for me, I would say that I have had success in terms of the success is around feeling like you've achieved something and feeling satisfied and looking back and going, yeah, that was good. I did that. I'm proud of doing that. So that's what I would do. And it is my core belief about inclusion, about equality, about equity of outcome for people, because we know that treating people equally is not going to have an equal outcome. So yes, I have.
Yeah. Like I said, I kind of think during the conversation you demonstrated that anyway. You know, it kind of came across pretty loud. Do you have a question for my next guest?
I would like to ask your next guest how they could be successful in empowering and noticing other people who could do better, and have they been successful in helping them achieve it?
Okay. So noticing other people that could do better and helping them achieve it. I'm paraphrasing that.
How successful have they been in raising up people who just needed a bit of a boost?
Yeah. Okay. That's good. That's a good question.
It's the next generation of successful people, our next generation of leaders.
Yeah. And that's actually really important in today's society where I was reading just before we started recording, I was reading a statistic that says that the younger generation, I can't remember what the right label is, they are turning to AI for answers first before they're turning to peers or parents or family members or mentors or coaches. So it's quite an interesting thing, right? That, the next generation may be getting it from AI, and AI may not be giving you the answers or the right answers, because we know that AI is still learning. It can, I heard another term, hallucinate. And so it might send you down a particular path. So, yeah, it's a fascinating question, actually.
Yeah, I think there's a report came out yesterday, I think, which looked at AI and how we're using it and how young people are using it. I think you're right, because with AIs can be founded on bias because it's only as good as the information it's able to draw on. Where if they go to you or I, as two amazing examples, they would not just have the wisdom that we've gained through our career, but our creative thinking, applying it to the context of their question, but also projecting it into the future.
But someone actually said to me as well that the beauty of AI is non-judgmental. So people who feel they might be judged in the process of reaching out to someone, they might feel more comfortable in chatting with ChatGPT or Google Gemini, whichever AI tool is of their choice, because they feel it's non-judgmental.
And what do you think about that? Is it non-judgmental?
Well, that's the $64 million question, right? Because as you said, what bias is already built into it based on how it's been built?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe only time will tell us that.
It will. My kind of gut instinct for it is actually that it probably is blinkered. And I think that the more we can encourage people to take their blinkers off and be self-aware about how judgmental they can be, and to then be less judgmental in doing so. And I think when young people should, when they're asking for input from people, I love Michael Bungay Stanya's, he does the lazy question. He always says start with what, with a question, and we should teach them that. We should also then get them to ask the and what else, because if they go to one person for a viewpoint, they should then come back with, and what else do you think?
Right.
And what other perspectives are there? Teaching young people to ask great questions is important. And the other thing I think is really important is helping people learn how to listen.
Yes. And
I don't know if you've come across Oscar Trimboli's
Yes, so
book.
I actually recorded a podcast with Oscar, and his book, How to Listen, is like, it's amazing. How to listen. Oh, you got it there. I should pull mine out as well. Yes, I recorded with Oscar about, published it probably about 3 months ago. So yes.
Fantastic. I'm a complete fangirl for his work.
Yeah.
I think his framework's really accessible, and I think every undergraduate program should have it as a core piece of reading material, and we should be helping people practice how to listen, because if we can't listen and we can't appreciate how we listen as an individual and be self-aware, then we'll never grow as individuals, as professionals, or help our society to grow. And so, yeah, I look forward to going and reading it, listening to it.
Yeah. I will send you the link, and I'll put a link in with this episode as well. So we're at the top of our time now, Jan. It's been a very interesting, fascinating conversation. We've kind of gone in all sorts of directions here. If people want to get in touch with you to find out more, or to engage your services for help with building their team or whatever, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
My website is catalytic.co.uk.
And that's catalytic spelled with a K, right?
At both ends.
Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. Jan Peters.
Right. Okay.
And that's probably the best way. But if you Google me, I've also got my website, drjanpeters.com.
Right. Okay, cool. We'll make sure those are included in the links to this episode. So thank you very much for taking part in Success Matters. So it's been a very fascinating conversation.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I love the kind of breadth and range of questions that you ask. And I hope one day we can have a coffee or something else and sit down and have a really longer chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. To find your success, contact me at info@successmatterscoaching.com. That's info@successmatterscoaching.com.